Well, hello and welcome back to Jones Financial Talk. Listeners, this is Nick Jones from Jones and Associates Premier Financial Solutions. As always, if you'd like more information about what you hear on this fine show today, you can find us in a couple of different ways. You can just go to jonesfinancialtalk.com or you can give us a call at 541 500 4321. Now, if you go to our website, once again, jonesfinancialtalk.com, you can pull up the radio page and listen to all of our past shows. And you can subscribe to our program on all kinds of different mediums like Apple Podcast and Spotify, or even on YouTube Music. And if you want to check out our YouTube channel, you can find us there. And on a weekly basis, my co-host who's with me today, Mr. Tony Shore, and I come up with great topics to discuss with you. The topic that we are going to start with today, listeners, is, pretty significant for most people. It is a 401k and specifically elements of that retirement strategy and how it can change depending on what your employer does, specifically with the match and other things. And I got lots of questions about what people should do depending on what their employer decides to do with their plan and how they change it annually. So we're going to touch on lots of those topics today. But let's bring in Mr. Tony Shore, who is just bright as ever. Mr. Shore, I hope you're doing well this week. How are you?
I am doing great this week. Thanks for asking. Had a great week last week. Got to get together with the fam. Really enjoyed that. And
Father's Day.
Yes. All three of our kids were home for Father's Day.
That's
and my son actually brought the food and cooked for us and cooked me some brats, beer brats with he boiled them. He did all this stuff. Cooked them in onions, then browned them in a pan. It was
Holy moly.
Good. Yeah, it was so good. Yeah, with fresh baked buns. It was fantastic. How about you? How was your Father's Day?
We had a great day as well. Just hung out in the beautiful Rogue Valley. It's starting to heat up here, so it was nice. It was kind of cooler on Father's Day, but we had some nice steaks. My kids did not cook for me. I did not want that to happen.
Oh, yeah. Typically, I wouldn't either, but
17.
my son. Yeah, 15 and 17. No. My son's 25, and this is the first time he's cooked for me. And It was fantastic, actually.
So all you're saying is I have to wait about another 8 years before this is going to happen for me.
I'd give it a good 8 on that one. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah. Before you start letting them cook you food, you definitely want to cook your own until then. You grilled steaks, I take it. Or
I did grill steaks for the boys. Okay. That's right. Yep.
Good. That sounds delicious. Well, I know you've been busy. We were talking before the show. It's just been a good year for you guys. I mean, you've been getting a lot of new business in, helping your current clients, doing the show, talking to people who call in from the show and set up consultations. I think that's fantastic. And this topic, though, you have for us today, it's a good one because most of the people I know have 401ks.
Yes.
I realize there are some, people who might be government workers who have TSPs, not too many with pensions still, but most people have some type of employer-sponsored plan like a 401k, 403b, what have you. So this is good to talk about these things, and especially with things change, there always are changes that are going to come. So having a strategy in place is huge. Where do you want to begin then with this topic?
Well, yeah, Tony, this is very, very important to discuss because you're right. Many employers offer a 401k plan, but it's one of those things that on an annual basis they can change. Specifically, things that are built into your plan that you want to take advantages of. And one of the biggest things that most people benefit from inside a 401k or 403b or TSP account is that company match. And so, lots of times, companies that have 401ks are looking at their bottom line and trying to figure out how they can afford to continue to pay benefits. And as we know, health insurance goes up, all types of benefits goes up. So 401ks are something that are stringently looked at. And, the match is just a big, big thing. A match is a huge part of having, a healthy 401k because of how it's structured to benefit the employee. And
Mhm.
there are numerous types of retirement accounts that provide us with possible tax advantages. When it comes specifically to a 401k, your plan is obviously going to help you shelter gains and interest and dividends while your money continues to grow in that account. But the match is a really, really big portion of it, and something that does change and go away on occasion.
Sure. So, yeah, I have read about some employers, downsizing their match, you know what I mean? And that's not good. Or sometimes some companies don't give a match. But that 401k match, and you've mentioned this numerous times to me personally and on the show, you got to take advantage of that 401k match and make sure that you're contributing enough to get the full match if your company offers that, though, right?
That's exactly correct. And so this is one of the main things that you should be looking at in your budget. If you sit down with a financial advisor and try to figure out, or get a second opinion, for instance, on your 401k plan, the match is a big topic. And even if you're not getting the match, the whole conversation, the bad B conversation, the budget is really what starts with how much you can afford to put into the 401k.
Sure.
And so you got to realize that after you review your budget, that there's, a good chance that you'll realize that you can keep saving for retirement. And with the hard work, that's going to obviously pay off in the long run, and just something that we need to think about for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we all have retirement goals, right? And we need to make sure we have strategies set up to achieve those goals. And, whether we get unexpected news like our company's going to cut our match, that can happen. But, if you have goals like travel, hobbies, things like that, um, I think it's important to not put them at risk by stopping contributions to your 401k. You want to keep those going. You don't even want to stop them for a few months. That money is for retirement, and you've got to, what helps them is to be consistent in putting in money on a regular basis, right?
That's right. My dad was a financial advisor for many years. And I remember the first job I got, he said, "Hey, you got to pay yourself first. Realize that you eventually are going to be in a situation where you don't want to work as much later in life. And so put a specific percentage amount away that you can stick to, maybe
Sure.
10% or something like that." And so, after you review your budget and realize that you can put that money away, it's just very, very important to see the best ways to do that. There are some unfortunate situations where you lose your company match, and if that's the situation, you can always make up for it if you can budget correctly by replacing some of that match with your own money, for instance. Right.
Yeah.
And why would you want to do that? Well, obviously, all of the benefits of investing over a very long period of time beat anything when you think about performance numbers. If time is on your side, that really is what happens when you purchase stocks and equities long term. That's something that's going to clearly grow over a long period of time. And so
Yeah.
the thought here is, don't pause your contributions and try to pick them back up later. It's really difficult for that to happen. If you are affected by your employer moving your match down, think about it in a different way. Continue to contribute and think and talk to another financial advisor, or somebody like myself, and get a second opinion of how you can make that difference up.
Yeah, there are ways. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Nick, because there are ways that you can make that difference up and maybe take the money you were putting in there and, put it into a Roth or do something like that. You never know. There are a lot of options out there, but I wouldn't advise anybody do any of this without working with a financial services professional like yourself, a fiduciary who's going to look out for your best interest, look at your own personal situation, and then help you decide, okay, here are the possibilities. Let's do the math. This would probably make the most sense for you and your situation and really help you reach those goals.
Yeah, there's just so many flexible investment options when it comes to retirement planning. right? Some of those are just like what you talked about, IRAs, for instance. They differ from 401ks in many meaningful ways. This year in 2024, the contribution limit that you can make into a 401k is $23,000, and if you're over 50, you actually can get up to 30,500 saved in that type of 401k plan.
Wow.
Now, for an IRA this year, the maximum contribution is more like $7,000. And if you're over 50, it's $8,000. So you've got lots of leeway here in using different types of plans. And as you mentioned, Tony, there's two different main types of IRAs. The traditional IRA is much like a 401k because the money that you contribute into that account lowers your taxable income. And, what's going to happen? Well, when you take that money out and take withdrawals, you'll pay taxes then. And then on the flip side, as many of our listeners know, if you use what's called a Roth IRA, you pay the taxes on those contributions up front. And that means that when you start taking withdrawals, they'll be tax free as long as you follow those rules.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They'll be tax free. You won't have to pay taxes on the gains or the principal at that point. Um, but, as you've said before, not every tool is right for everyone. So maybe an IRA isn't the best fit for your own personal situation. Could that be true too?
Definitely. I mean, IRAs do come with positives and negatives, and they that's how you're going to determine if they're a good option for one person or entirely wrong for another person. And if you're thinking about an IRA, I just urge you to sit down with somebody. Depending on your income level, depending on your other savings accounts, depending on your 401k plan, that's going to dictate, how and why and when you should use those other options.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. I think that's important. Now, let's take a minute before we keep going. We have a lot more to cover, but why don't you let our listeners out there know, Nick, how they can get a hold of you and set up that no charge complimentary consultation?
Sure thing. Two easy ways. They can just pick up the phone here in the Rogue Valley and give us a call at 541-500-4321, or they can go to our website at jonesfinancialtalk.com, click on the response tabs, and ask any questions that they might have.
All right, sounds good. Now, you've been looking into some of the things people might want to do. Let's say, for example, if their company ends their 401k match, that would be a blow to a lot of people. And just kind of overall, what tools are available for them. What do you have for us next?
So the first thing I would tell you is make sure that you look at how you can get the most out of that company match if they're still making it. And there are many different ways that this can be changed, Tony, inside plans. Okay. Lately, advisors have started what's called stretching their match. And what that does is, in order for you to get 100% match from your employer, they've changed things around a little bit. So instead
Sure.
of saying we're going to give you 100% of the first 3% that you put in, meaning if you put 3% away, they're going to give you 3%. A lot of employers have started providing a 50% match or a partial match on some of the money. So in that situation, they might still say, we'll give you 3%, but in order to get the 3%, you have to put 6% of your own money away. Okay.
Right.
And so they are putting the onus on the employee to save more money to get the full match.
Yep.
And that strategy is often called stretching the match. And it's designed to obviously provide you with an incentive on how to contribute more money to your account.
Yeah, yeah, that's I've been with an employer that's how they worked it. In fact, it was those numbers exactly. They would match 3%, but you had to put up 6% of your income to get that match. Which
That's exactly
I'm
right.
in my 50s, so I'm putting in more than 6%.
Sure.
And I wish I had started putting in money into a 401k or an IRA when I was 21. Right, like my kids are doing, which I think is so smart. And boy, if I think a lot of our listeners are probably like, yeah, I wish. How many people come to you, Nick, and say, yeah, I wish I had started an IRA or a Roth when I was in my 20s, right?
Yeah, lots. And it gets back to that point that I mentioned about my dad, right? If you were just in the situation where you were told from a very young age, pay yourself first, put 10% of your paycheck away, it just kind of becomes second nature. every time you get a raise, you just still put 10% of your overall amount of, paycheck away, and it just kind of sticks for a long period of time.
Yep. Exactly. Well, I think that's fantastic. And I like to think of matching funds as free money
Yes.
because what your employer matches, that's free money. That's money that you don't want to leave on the table. You want to make sure whatever the amount is. And some people just don't take the time to figure out what the rules of their company's IRA, or I should say 401k match is. And
Hmm.
so they might not be putting in enough to get a full match, or they might not be understanding what needs to happen or how much they could be getting. And you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And, if you don't contribute enough money to your 401k to trigger that company match, you might miss out on that match entirely, right?
Exactly. And I see this a lot, actually. You really have to understand how it is built into your plan. And so
Sure.
maybe it would be helpful to, examine some specific examples,
Sure.
of company matches. The first of which we've talked a little bit about, a partial match, let's say up to the first 6%. So, very often that partial match is a 50% of whatever you contribute. And so in this instance, if your company contributes 50 cents on every dollar that you put into your 401k, up to 6% of your gross annual salary, they'll give you 3% if you put 6% away. And that's a very useful tool for you to continue to understand and just know how it's supposed to be working. Okay. Here's an example. So if you make $50,000 a year and you contribute 6% of your paycheck to the 401k, you're going to get a company match of $1,500 a year. Okay. And 6% of 50,000 that you put in is $3,000. Okay. So if your company matches half of that, total, you're putting $4,500 into your 401k,
Yeah.
right? And
That's
and
good.
and only putting 3,000 of your own money in there. So that's a very good specific situation that you should be following.
Yeah. And are there companies that do, I've heard of it, but is it a unicorn, the dollar for dollar match?
It is, and that used to happen more, previously to COVID, I would say.
Hmm.
In those situations, companies can contribute every single dollar for the dollar that you put in up to a certain limit, right? So,
Sure.
maybe in that specific situation that we were talking about before, example, if you make $50,000 a year and you put, let's just say, 5% of money into your plan, that's $2,500. And from there, if your company gives you a 100% match, they're going to put in another $2,500, 100% of what you've put in. So that brings your total to what, 5,000 a year. Very, very beneficial part of a plan that would be great in
Sure.
order to do that.
Sure. Sure. And what about, and also companies might require you to work for them a certain amount of time before they start matching. So that's good to
Sure
know
thing.
too. Some
Or
some
make you
companies like,
eligible for the plans in a
yeah,
certain
you're
amount of
not
time.
eligible for the match until you've worked here 90 days, they might say, right?
Yep. Yep. They
Yeah.
do. Yep.
And so a lot of our listeners probably know the IRS has annual contribution limits to 401ks. What did you say? What are the limits for that again this year?
Okay, so for this year, you can contribute up to $23,000 of your pre-tax income into your 401k. And if you're over 50, that amount goes up to $30,500. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, additionally, the combined contribution between you and your company can actually be as high as almost $70,000 this year with catch-up contributions included.
Wow. Wow. And that's good info. And I appreciate how clearly you're presenting this to us. It makes perfect sense. But you want to seek additional guidelines and advice on managing your 401k. And again, that's a reason to work closely with somebody like yourself. So, what's next?
So we also should discuss vesting. This is a very important part of the company match. And the money that you dedicate to go into your 401k plan belongs to you, even if you decide to leave your company for another opportunity. But the vesting refers to the company match in many situations, Tony.
So, and by vesting, are you talking about you have to be at the company a certain number of years in order to keep that match and take it with you if you leave the company? right?
That's right. So let me give you an example of a pretty common vesting schedule. It would be a 5-year term
Right.
where every year that you work for the company, you get 20% more of the match that they've given to you. Okay. So if you've been there for a year, you get 20% of the money that the company gave to you. If you've been there for 2 years, you get 40%. If you've been there for 3 years, you get 60%. If you've been there for 4 years, you get 80%. And then after you've been an employee for 5 total years, you would be able to walk away if you left that company with 100% of the match that they gave to you.
Yeah. So even though you're eligible for the match at let's say after 90 days, you can't keep any of it until you've been there a certain period, and you can't take all of it with you unless you've worked for the company for. And we're using an example here, but I've heard companies with 4 years, five is typical, I think. Some companies might be a little longer. But the reason I think this is so important, I heard a story. I was talking to a friend the other day that one of their parents had actually worked for a company, and they had worked there like 9 years and 9 months. I think it was 9. So it was 9 years, 9 months, and they left the company, and they were unable to take their match with them because you had to work
Crazy.
there for 10 years or whatever it was. And maybe it was
Yeah.
5.
I
But
mean, it's
it was nuts. So, had they just worked there, had they known that, and just so ask, go
yes.
ask your HR department if you're, hey, what's the vesting schedule? How many years do I have to work here to get 100%? Or look in the employee handbook if your
Yep.
company has one, because you need to know, because you don't want to leave 1 month before and leave hundreds or thousands of dollars on the table, right?
And that unfortunately does happen quite a bit, and for
Well, that's why
large
companies do it.
401k.
They get to keep
Yeah,
that
yeah.
money. I mean,
For,
I mean that
for
that rule is there for a reason, and
yep,
it's like gift cards. Places love selling gift cards because what are the stats?
that
Like
you never use
only
it, 8% or something, or or some huge
yeah,
number don't even use them, right?
it's crazy how much
Yeah.
money companies like it's literally kept companies like Best Buy going.
Yep.
The gift cards, it's amazing.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. If you're looking for another job, just delay your search for a short period of time to get that full match. You could be
Yeah.
talking about literally thousands and thousands of dollars that you're just giving up by not paying attention to that. If you are part of a large 401k plan, they typically put that information even on your statement so you can follow it on a regular
Yes.
basis. And so it's just very, very important for you to think about that and how concerning that could be if you move to a new job.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and when it comes to 401k matches, like, and contributions, is there a calendar year when they end? Like when how long do those contributions count toward, this year's taxes or next year's?
Yep. So IRS contributions reset annually for 401k plans on January 1st. So that means
Okay.
that contributions for this taxable year have to be made by December 31st to be counted towards this year's contribution limit.
So it's the actual calendar year, nothing tricky there.
And that is different, obviously, than IRAs and Roth IRAs. In those specific types of accounts, you actually can make contributions for the prior year up until when you file your taxes. So a lot of people do that even
Ah.
into the following year if they haven't filed their taxes yet, as an example.
Yeah, so, if you do it before April 15th or whatever that date is, then
Yep.
you're golden for an IRA or that. Okay. Okay,
Yep.
so, that's good. Now, this has been great so far, good show so far. You've talked about 401ks, a lot of different things. This is such a huge part of most people's retirement plans and retirement incomes are these employer-sponsored plans like a 403b or a 401k or a 457, a TSP. So, it's been an interesting conversation. Where do you want to go next?
So let's begin by talking about alternatives to 401k plans if
Sure.
they're not offered or they're not attractive for you at your current employer. And the easiest thing to do and place to start is to look at traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. If your company either doesn't offer a 401k or if you're self-employed, you can always establish an IRA, which is an individual retirement account. And these accounts can provide huge tax advantages depending on if you use a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. And you also have the opportunity to be able to save in some of these accounts on top of your 401k. It is dependent on the type of income that you have and how much you have, and what contributions you're using to be tax deductible and not. But the point is, there's lots of opportunity for you to be able to put money in both these types of plans if you want to as well.
Yeah. Yeah, those are accounts. We've talked about them before. Also an important part of financial planning, IRAs, Roth IRAs. Are there early withdrawal penalties with IRAs? There are, correct?
There are. So in
Just like
many cases,
401ks?
just like 401ks, IRAs have early withdrawal penalties if you take distributions before you're 59 and a half. There are many exceptions to that rule, but Tony, I've seen it so many times that people leave a company and they say, well, I only had 10 or 15,000 in that 401k. I just cashed it out when I left. And I said, well, if you're
Oh,
under 59 and a half, you paid taxes on it and a 10% penalty. You're just giving the IRS all of that money. And
yeah,
so
that's
you got to be
crazy.
careful about that for sure.
Yeah, you want to avoid penalties like the 10% early withdrawal penalty. And of course, you still have to pay taxes on that money. So don't do that. Plus, I don't mind the 59 and a half rule, although I wish it was an even number. I would prefer they just rounded it up to 60.
Yeah.
But I don't mind it because that's for retirement. And
Yep.
it's good to force people to use it for retirement and not before then. Oh, I need a new car. Hey, I've got this money in my 401k,
I'll just pull it out of there.
I'm only 45. Let me get a new vehicle. And that's not the way it works. That's not,
Yep.
you're going to pay for it later on. I'll tell you that.
Definitely.
And that's not good. And you'll end up paying way more taxes and way more, the penalty. So, okay. So, you want to work with a financial professional before making any decision like that. What do you have for us on traditional IRAs versus Roth IRAs?
So the biggest question here is, do you want to pay the taxes today or do you want to pay them later?
Okay.
And the reason why is because with a traditional IRA, your contributions go in immediately and they're deducted from your pay right now. And that means that once you decide to take money out of that account, however far down the road it's going to be, you are going to pay taxes on every single distribution that you take.
Yeah.
Now, conversely to that, the Roth IRA is a very powerful tool. You don't get the tax deduction today up front for putting the money into that account, but when you begin withdrawals, as long as you follow the rules, they will be completely tax free. And so
Nice.
there's so many things that you should consider in investing. Roth IRAs are like that golden ticket that just most people should just look at and think through about how they're going to utilize those.
Yeah.
There's lots of other reasons why as well,
Yeah.
like not having to take required minimum distributions when you turn 73, for instance.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot. We've done whole shows on that, but we're out of time for today. It just flew by, Nick. Let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you.
Sure thing. So you can just go to jonesfinancialtalk.com, check out us on the internet there and ask any specific questions you have. Or if you're local here in the Rogue Valley, just pick up the phone and give us a call, listeners. We're at 541-500-4321.
All right, and that does it for today's episode of Jones Financial Talk with our host, Nick Jones.